In this video, we're going to upgrade our cableless IDX battery plate to the version compatible with the red IPP2 V7 firmware. The cableless upgrade kit includes the PCB with 2 pre-wired D-taps. These are pre-wired so that we can now monitor the current used by accessories and then cut it off if it exceeds 3.8 amps, while still allowing the camera to be powered. Also included in the kit is an Allen wrench used to remove the 2 smaller screws holding the PCB in place. Tools that you'll need to provide are a medium-sized screwdriver and then a small jeweler-style screwdriver. To start, we'll loosen the 4 screws holding the IDX plate onto the back of the quick back. Now we can remove the plate. And there is a white connector here that we'll need to separate from the cableless module. So just use your fingers and gently pull that out. We'll set the power plate aside and come back to it later. Next, we'll take our jeweler-style screwdriver and loosen these 6 small M2 Phillips head screws. Now that the 6 screws are removed, we can take our cover plate and set it aside. In later versions of the cableless battery modules, we stopped using these washers that we're showing here. And when we reassemble this, we're actually going to leave these washers out because they are extremely annoying to reinstall. And they aren't critical to the function of the device. So we'll take these washers out now and set them aside. Next, we'll use our small Allen wrench and remove the 2 screws that are holding the PCB in place. Then we can gently remove the original PCB and set that aside. Next, we'll take our new PCB and install it in the place of the original. We'll take our 2 screws that we just removed and install them with our Allen wrench. And you don't want to over tighten these screws, just get them moderately tight with your fingers. After you get the 2 screws tight, we can then align our D-taps so that we can put them through the cover plate opening. So we'll just gently push the wires down towards this angle. We'll take our cover plate and insert them over the D-taps. You'll also want to make sure that the springs are vertical on the screws here. And then we'll align the cover plate and push it down into place. We'll take the 6 screws and reinstall them in the corresponding holes. Now that the 6 screws are tight, we can set this assembly aside and work on the IDX plate. We'll remove the 4 screws here with our medium-sized screwdriver. These 4 screws are self-tapping plastic screws, so you don't want to get those mixed up with the M3 screws that are used to hold the IDX plate to the cableless module. We'll set that aside with the 4 screws, and now we can service the back D-taps on the IDX plate. The first step will be to pop the D-taps out of their original position here. To do that, there's a tab here that you can pull back with your fingernail and then pull the D-tap out. We'll actually take the plastic piece off, set that aside, and then we'll do the same for the second D-tap. What you're left with is the 2 D-tap pins and the red wire attached. That goes to the fuse here, which is just above the magnet. And that fuse then runs down to the contact, which interfaces with the battery. The best tool to use to modify this is a pair of wire cutters or dikes. The worst possible thing you can use is a pair of scissors, which is what I thought I would show here. So if you don't have any of the wire cutting tools, a pair of scissors will do it, but it is a bit of effort. So we'll just use our scissors here, apply some pressure, and then snip the wires. You want to cut this extremely close to the solder so that the lead does not touch any of the surrounding metal. So you can see it's very, very short here. Now we'll pull off the fuse assembly, and it may take a little bit of pressure, but since we're not going to reuse this, feel free to tug on these wires, or we can use a screwdriver to help pry. There we go. So this fuse assembly, the D-tap pins and the wires will not be used, so we'll set that aside and discard it later. What we're left with is the 2 ground pins for the D-taps and our standard contact block for the cableless battery module. So we'll bring our cableless battery plate back over here. The next step is to put the metal cover plate from the IDX plate around the D-tap wires in this orientation. We'll then install these D-taps into the IDX plate. So we'll take the first one, install the ground pin, and then push it back into place where the D-tap was previously removed. We'll do that with the second one as well. The red wire and pin are permanently installed in the D-tap, so you don't have to worry about accidentally mixing these two up. Push that into place. You'll also want to make sure that the shape of the D-tap is a D in relation to the D slot on the IDX plate. So you'll see that the curve of this corner and the curve of that corner match. There's a flat here and a flat on the IDX plate. Okay, the next step is to then install the cover plate back on the IDX plate. You'll want to make sure that you have correct wire routing and that you don't pinch the wires when you're reinstalling this cover plate. So what you can do is guide the wires with your fingers, but then also use the plate, move it around a bit, and make sure that there is no bulges in the plate between the plastic and the metal. Then we'll reinstall our plastic self-tapping screws into the holes using our medium screwdriver. And don't over tighten these either, just make sure they're snug. All right, next we'll install the white connector back onto the cableless board. We'll probably bring these a little bit closer together to make it easier. Push that into place. And the final step will be to tuck these wires into the recesses here so that we don't pinch any cables when we put the plate back on the quick back portion. So we'll just tuck these wires into the cavity here. And then what we can do is move these plates around like this until all of the wires are tucked into the assembly and that there's no gap between the cableless assembly and the power plate. That looks good. So now we can reinstall our M3 screws using our medium screwdriver. That's it. Now you're ready to attach it to your camera.